Yes, welcome to another class of object-oriented programming. In this class, we are going to focus on object and class relationship, and we're going to start learning object-oriented paradigm. So in the course so far, we were looking into, GUI components such as drag and drop component, which you can use as drag and drop components. But we basically created them hard coding in Java, mostly on Swing library. So we learn about text field, text area, buttons, radio button, checkbox, all these components that we covered so far. It was actually very close to visual programming course that you probably have covered. But the idea of this course is not about learning these visual programming principles, but rather object-oriented parts. So the idea here is to build a program in a fully object-oriented way so that you can maintain the program easier than all the programs that you have done in the previous lectures. So today we're gonna get into the zone of learning all these relationships, like the paradigms of object-oriented programming. There are 4 different things that we need to cover up for the rest of the course. These are object and class relationship. Obviously, that's the first one we're gonna spend some time today. We're gonna see encapsulation. Then we're gonna see inheritance, which is parent-child relationship. Finally, abstract classes and polymorphism will be our final topic. So another thing I like to mention is that your second project is became available. It's has become available on the course page. So if you go to the object-oriented programming course page, you will see the project sections, and in there, the second project is now uploaded. So you'll be able to see it. So let me just expand this. We go down and let me change my status to student so you can see it better. So this is how you see the course page. And if you go down, you will see there's a new project now, Summer 1920 Project 2, which is again 30%, and your final exam will be 40%. Okay. So if you click on this one, you will see a description of the project. And once again, you do not only submit the project, you also submit the report with it. The report format is the same as the previous project, but this time I want you to focus on getting screenshots of what you have done progressively and show and discuss them. I want to see some critical discussion. You can discuss, for example, what was the very hard part for you to do during the program, which part was easier to deal, which part was harder. You can even compare what you have done if you have done it with another language, like I assume you know C#, for example. If you have done the same project with C#, was it going to be easier or more difficult? I want to see some kind of critical discussion on your side, okay? And I do believe that is the core of engineering. If you can put some critical discussion here that shows me, you know, that you understand some of these object-oriented programming constructs, you'll get a good mark for sure. Okay, that's what I want to see in the project. Now, in the last years, when I give a project like this, I usually allow people to do database connections. I encourage them to use Apache Derby, MySQL, SQLite, some kind of small database, not small, but relatively easy to manage database system. And this year, I want to change it a bit because what I realized is that students contact the previous students all the time and get the projects from the previous years and just change a couple of things and present it to me. which I think is not a good thing, because it's not going to benefit you in any way. You need to understand that this course is much bigger than passing the course. It is probably one of the most important courses that you're going to take through your university life about programming, because none of those other programming courses are encouraging you to build realistic programs, but this one does. Okay, and that is the big difference. So what I expect from you in this specific project is to build me a realistic program. The program itself is a flight system, is a desktop application where people can use to book their flights. Okay, that is what I encouraging you to do. So you're going to design an airline application for flight. So there will be some destinations from and to go. You can do it one way, return, and there is the departure date and a return date. Now you can use date time picker for this, which you can look it up online how to use it. It is also available on NetBeans, because that's where I created these interfaces anyway. And you can also select number of passengers, and the limitations for this are it depends on you. Like, I want you to go above and beyond. So you decide the from field, you decide the to field, you gonna decide how many passengers you're gonna allow and stuff like that. Okay, I want you to go a little bit above and beyond. Show me your creativity when you design this program. Okay, that is why I never gave you, okay, it's gonna be Nicosia to Istanbul, or it's gonna be this and that. I didn't really. Let me just share this if anyone comes in, so that they will find us on Zoom. So I want you to do some kind of, research, or look into other places, such as I gave you in Turkish Airlines interface, that you can see how these applications are being done in real. So observe them and to basically decide what to do. So you can kind of like select fields in here, and you can select, for example, Ercan, and then you select the dates. You see it's pretty much the same way that I presented you, and then you select something in here, and then you select how many people. You see adults, child, infant, whatever. So we don't have to do this. You don't have to do this much of detail, of course, because it's not going to be a real application being used by a company. But what I want you to do is to pursue it as realistic as possible. And your chances to get a high grade will increase in that regard as well. Like, the more you think through this, the more there is the chance for you to get a high mark. And it is very easy for you perhaps to see some examples online, because I actually Googled this and I watched some YouTube videos before giving this assignment. I know that there are tutorials about this, how to build an application like that. Even on YouTube, you can easily find some examples, and please use them. Like, don't, of course, copy paste the code without understanding what it does, but you can use resources to build your application, as long as you do not go into plagiarism waters, that your application is basically a copy from another person's work. You can use some of the things that you did not understand to get some help online from Stack Overflow or YouTube. That's absolutely fine. I am also giving you some sections in here in the first couple of, interfaces. So what you need to do is, the first time it opens up, you're going to fill this information, and then you're going to book your flight. Basically, it's going to be a basic flight, economic flight, business class, whatsoever. And then based on it, you're going to basically decide a price for each and every one of them. And I want to see how you form up that algorithm, which is another part of your research. Like, What if I offer a flight from Istanbul to Ercan with economic flight? And then how is that different from business? So I want to see how you handle that so that you can build up your business side of things, okay? And once this information is entered correctly, I'm expecting you to design a login interface so that people can log in to the system and book their flight. And if they don't have a login interface, they can actually sign up a form in which they are expected to enter some data, which are all listed in here as well, okay? So in case that they don't have an account, a username, password, password confirmation, name, surname, passport number, sex, date of birth, any disability should be entered. And all of these are going to be stored in JSON. Why do I give you JSON instead of a database? Because this course is basically object-oriented programming. I want to focus on objects and how you use these things in applications. As you might know, JSON means JavaScript Object Notation. It is a technology developed to not to replace, but kind of like ease the way that the what XML files do, because parsing information from XML is really hard. It's not hard, but it's tedious. It's a difficult experience sometimes, especially if the XML file is a big file. But this is much easier in JSON, and you can do this in an object-oriented way, very, very straightforward. And you can find examples there. I searched them online before I give you this exercise. So I'm absolutely sure there are examples there to show you how you can put data into JSON, how you can call it, and how you can delete it. I don't want you to do edit. So this is also mentioned in the project. So you can insert, select, and delete, but edit is not needed, okay? You do not need to update JSON file once this information is written. Of course, if you want to do this, please do go above and beyond. That's something I always encourage. Do something different so I can be amazed and I'll say, okay, this guy really tried his best. You know, he even went beyond what I have given as fundamentals, so he deserves an A. I will definitely consider that. But it's not a necessity. You don't have to in the assignment. Some of the things that you need to pay attention in this project is that you need to look up first how these things are handled in real applications. Okay, I understand Ryanair or Turkish Airlines whatsoever. They do this online, so you're not going to build an online application, but the mechanism is the same, okay? It doesn't matter. So your one is not going to be used online, but in a kind of like a travel agency. But still, it works in the same principle. You still need to select a destination, you still need to select dates, you still need to indicate how many adults are going to travel, their details, whatsoever. All of these have to be in the system. Another thing that you will need to do is to look up research. That's the core of engineering. Engineering equals to Googling stuff. This is something that you should really get a habit. And as a skill, you need to teach yourself. Don't expect your lecturers or anyone else to teach you stuff. Being an engineer means you can teach to yourself, okay? And that is where we actually give you the engineering degree. Once you come to a certain point that you do stuff by yourself without relying on anyone, then you become engineer and you are awarded this degree. If you're gonna ask me, oh, how do I use JDatetime Picker? How do I use JSON? How to do this? How to do that? Then what's the point of giving the project? The projects are given to you so that you will search these things and you will learn them online by yourself, okay? If I give you everything in the notes, every example, then you will only copy paste me. That is not something we want from you. We want you to come up with your own designs, your own development, your own ideas, and defend them on a ground that makes sense. Okay, that is what we expect, at least what I expect from you. You will need to do a lot of research on Google in order to learn how to use, for example, datetime picker or JSON and other stuff. You can also use drag and drop features of modern IDEs such as NetBeans or IntelliJ. So all this stuff that is visible here, you don't have to do it hardcore. If you want to basically drag and drop it from NetBeans, you can do that. I don't mind. But any consequences, anything that goes behind the scenes that is basically causing you a problem, you have to deal with that part, okay? Because it is your program. So as you go through the program, if you use drag and drop features, I think that's a risk that you are willing to take. Yes, the drag and drop features have some really cool advantages, such as, you know, you can do the form, you can design a form like that. There's the interface down there. You can drag and drop. Let me expand this. You can drag and drop components like this, size them, arrange them however you like, and they look exactly the same, which is great. But there is a problem that this creates some background code, and it's not always easy to address it, especially if you don't know what you are doing. If you go to the source code, you see there's a bunch of code created automatically. It is a generated code, and you can't even delete this. You see, I'm pressing on delete button. I don't know if you can hear on my keyboard. It cannot be deleted. So you need to understand how this is being handled here and how you can change some of the features, okay? You will need to use the properties windows most probably and use the code to change the variable names, to assign events. So you need to understand how this works if you're going to use the drag and drop features. Or, like I said, you can hardcore it. Again, it's your choice. I am not limiting you in any way. I'm trying to encourage you to find your own path when doing this project. Okay? Finally, don't plagiarize, please. I know that this is so lame and a lot of people tell you, oh, don't copy paste, don't do this, don't do that. What I am telling you, why I am telling you this is because this is now going to be your future. It became really, really difficult nowadays to get into a company that will pay you well. Okay, I assume you all chosen this degree because you want to get paid well and you want to have a good job. Now, you can cheat in this assignment and you can fool me and even get a good mark, but what's going to happen afterwards? Like, you wouldn't learn anything. You just copy paste someone else's work and you just made it available, but you didn't learn anything. And when you get the diploma, you'll be just an unskilled person who didn't even deserve that diploma. And what you're going to do with it? Nothing. If your uncle or your father has a job or company, great. Go there and work for them. But if you are on your own and you have to find a job, people are not going to hire you just because you have a diploma. People will hire you because you know how to do stuff. And they will ask you to take exams. Like if you apply, for example, to a Java position, they might ask you to take a Java exam. And if you fail from that exam, how is that gonna give you the job? It's not gonna give you the job in any way. So think of university life as a tutorial in your life, okay? Try to learn from this experience as much as you can, because it might be very classic, but the world outside is very, very cruel, guys. The university life is a safe environment, I assure you. And I worked in companies and it can get really, really stressful, really difficult, both to deal with people and the challenges of the work environment. Okay, so think of this as an opportunity. Your lecturer, in this case me, is giving you an opportunity to build up a realistic application. Okay, I am not your enemy. I am not trying to fail you by giving you difficult assignments. I am trying to make you prepared for the real world when you go out there, so you will know what to face. Okay, and it's not going to be very easy always, especially if you're going to get a developer's uh, uh, job to build up stuff. So try to understand from now how to deal with these technologies. Like JSON is relatively a new technology. It's not very new, but it is, being used right now. So this is a good opportunity for you to learn this stuff and combine them with your lectures, so that when you build up a CV, in addition to your diploma and apply to a job, you can claim that you know JSON, you know how to deal with object-oriented concepts and so forth. Is this clear now? Do you understand what I'm saying? Can you please reply on the group chat or talk? Hello, is anybody there? Did you listen what I said? Did you understand what I'm talking about? Any questions on the assignment or anything you did not understand? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna move on to our subject for today. I'm gonna create a new Java class, and this class is gonna be the exercise that I mentioned last week. Remember that we discussed last week the main exercise that we were gonna do it today. It's an exercise about jobs, objects and classes. We're gonna name basically a class, and then based on that class, we're gonna create a couple of objects and show you how you can, create objects from the same class, and we're gonna use some of the object-oriented concepts such as constructor, destructor, object-oriented paradigms, concepts, and so forth. Okay, that's what we're gonna do for today. So just going back to the exercise at the top, there's this exercise called man, and I'm gonna use this exercise, exactly the same thing, just to describe you how you can structure your classes. Now, whenever you create a class, as we discussed in the previous lecture, you basically create a template for your objects. So all the attributes, all the behavior of your class is actually defined in here. And every object that are going to be created, they use a constructor, which is the default function of that specific class. Okay, so if a class name is man, then the function that has the name man is the constructor of that class. And funny enough, you can have more than one constructor. You don't have to have only one. You can have as many as you like. But the problem with it is that the parameters you pass must be different parameters ordered in different order. So by knowing this, you can create your own classes as you like. So that is what we're gonna do right now. I'm gonna go back to the NetBeans, and I'm going to create a class called man. One of the things that you need to know about creating the classes is that every single variable in it, every single one of them, unless specified otherwise, is private. So basically, if a man has a variable, let's say height, this is going to be, for example, a double value. Make it a double value or a float value, and it's going to be private. We can do the same thing for weight, and if you're going to define something else for this man, such as age, then it's going to be an integer. So you can define as many variables as you like. In this example, we had, you can see the eye color, weight, and height. Let's add the eye color as well. So all of these variables here are defined under the class section, and every one of them is private. Now, one of the big mistakes students make is that they don't type anything here. So instead of saying private integer age, they just type, let's say, string. But this is actually wrong, because as you type this, because you did omitted the modifier, it becomes public. And in object-oriented programming, public is not a good identifier, because you allow that variable to be changed from outside the class. This is something we really discourage, okay? Every class has their own identity, and hence their variables should be protected. You can think of the variables as like your private belongings in your house or in your room. So not anyone should come and pick up things in your room without your permission. They should ask your permission first. That is the polite way, and that is how it should be. And you can think of this in the same way. If they're going to change the state of these variables, they have to get the permission of the man class. And this is where the constructor comes in. Like whenever you create a constructor, which is public man in this case, and a constructor is always public, you can define the number of variables that you can pass inside. You can pass all the variables. You can pass only one, you can pass 2, 3, or you can pass none. It all depends on what the UML diagram gives you at that point. There will be a UML class diagram in most cases showing you how the class is structured. And there will be a good reason behind that. For example, if you have 20 variables, it is not a good idea to define them all together in the constructor, because at that point you might not even know, the state of the variable. So it is always a good idea to set up a set and get methods, which is something that I mentioned last week as well. And that is the rule for encapsulation. So for this specific exercise, I'm going to define only the height and the width, okay, for this constructor. And how it works is that you basically define an attribute in here. Doesn't even matter what it is. You can say integer h, not integer, sorry, double. They have to be of the same data type. So double h, double w. And then once it is inside, you set up the class value to the value that was passed. You can do this by using this keyword. This will allow you to access to this class features. This includes the functions, also the variables. In this case, if I want to set up the height of the man, I can simply say this height is equals to h. And the same can be done for the weight. This will allow your constructor to assign these values. So as these values are passed in the constructor, they will be assigned, as you can see here. And you can define as many constructors as you like. There is no limitation for this. The only thing you need to pay attention is that it shouldn't have exactly the same variables in the exact order. So if you want to have another constructor, this time the variables or their order should be different. So we can say double H, double W, integer H, and so forth. Okay, so the data type has to be different. You see, we use different kind of variables in here. And to initialize this, I'm going to say H is equals to H. You see, with these ones, I use a different name. So I just said H and W, but with this one, I use the same. So this means that it is possible that you use the same name holder as the actual variable. NetBeans and other IDEs as well, they will help you to identify which one is which. When you say this age, it refers to the age of the class. But when you say age, it refers to the parameter that comes from the function. That way, you can identify which is which. In this case, whatever this one is will be assigned to the class one. And then you can use it however you like. Same goes for the others. So height, weight equals to. So as you can see in this example, I have two different constructors. Constructors are the default methods of objects. Whenever I create an object, I have to use one of the constructors that exist inside my class. So if I'm going to create a man, it has to use one of these constructors, either the one at the top or the bottom. Now, we have done all of this stuff, but there are still problems. You can see in here that this one passes 3 variables, this one passes 2. In this case, eye color was never identified in the class. Also, age is never identified in the man constructor. To overcome this, you can actually allow get and set methods, which will allow you to insert these values later on after the object creation. And that is called encapsulation. It kind of like prevents other classes or objects to directly modify the state of a variable, but rather you have to take a permission to do this. You don't have to type getter and setter methods manually because every IDE nowadays, they support them. All you have to do is right click on NetBeans, go to insert code. And from the list, you can set getter and setter. You can get them separately or together. Now, I always identified height and weight in both of them. But the ones that I did not always identify was age and eye color. So I can generate these at the end. And as you can see, the code is being inserted there. So it puts the integer get age value, returning the age. It puts the set age value, get eye color, and set eye color. You can write these things manually as well, but NetBeans and other IDEs nowadays, it allows you to put them, automatically like that. If you want to show the height and weight value, we also need a getter for them. So we can go into the getter and select height and weight, which will allow these values to be visible there as well. And very easily, you can put them, as you can see, into the class. So your class has all get methods here. Let's just carry this up so they are all in one place. And also set age and set eye color. We didn't need to set up the height and the weight because they are already defined in the constructor, and we know that the object has to use them. Now, up to here, do you have any questions? Did you understand why we use getter and setters? Did you understand what is a constructor or how the class is formed? Very good. Now what we need to do is, from here, we're going to create a main class for the map. So I'm going to come in here. Let me maximize this. Java class. I'm just going to call it man application, meaning that man application class, and finish it. As you can see, this is an application class, and in a program that you're going to run, usually you have only one application class. So I'm going to copy paste the main method from another application, so that to make sure that this is my application class. I'm going to come here, make sure that it has a main method. If you go back to the man, you will see that there are no main methods. You see? Because man is not an application class, it's a concurrent class. A concurrent class means that you will create an object based upon it and you're going to use it. And the object itself will be created inside here in the main. Okay, so in order to create the object, you first type the name of the class. In this case, man. Then you give your object a name, such as tall man, and put the keyword new and type again, man. But now you have to open a bracket and use one of the constructors. In this case, I have two constructors. One that defines height and weight. The other one defines age, height, and weight. So I'm going to define the tall man as 25 years old, comma. He's tall, so I'm going to, the second one, as you can see on the list, is height. So I'm going to make him 195, comma. And the weight will be, let's say, 83. It is not very heavy. 85. So when you do this, you will realize that you can pass these values now into your constructor. So this one didn't find it. Let's see. Main class. Then use the same package. So let's just copy paste this into the same part, the factor. Yes, now it's okay. It wasn't in the same location, so it wasn't reading it, but now it does. Now you see there are no errors, but this one is underlined gray because we basically created this, but we never used it. So in order to put this into the usage, we're going to put tall man. And now, as you can see, you can access to all the get and set methods. Now we identified man's age, height, and weight, but we never identified the eye color. And that's where I'm going to type it. From here, I'm going to type blue, indicating that this man has blue eyes. Now, if you want to show all these properties, you can simply put a J option pane, show message dialog. First one, I'm just going to make null, and the second one, you can basically define what you want to show in here. Okay. Such as tall man, age, tall man. Oops. Let's put plus tall man dot get age. So if you want to return the value of that specific person, you can simply just use the get method. In this case, if you want to show other values, we're going to kind of like follow the same structure. we're gonna copy paste tall man. In this case, the second one is height. Tall man dot height. Put the dot, get height. You see, it shows you there already, so you don't have to do anything. You just need to show the value. And once you have done this, you can simply copy paste all these features and show every single property. The next one is weight. The last one is eye color. And all you have to do is to change the get method. You put this get weight. And in this one, get eye color. And because we don't have anything else after this, I'm just going to close the bracket and put the semicolon. So this one will obviously show you all the features of your tall man. And when you want to run the class, you only run the application. And as you can see, the features are displayed there. It will be better if you put \n perhaps at the beginning of each one of them, so that they will look one after another, line by line. Yes, it looks better now. So tall man height, tall man weight, tall man eye color, and tall man age. You can even enhance this, like by adding stuff at the end, like years old, centimeter, kg, and blue. So even when you run this thing, now you can see the units. So this man is 25 years old, 195, 82 kg, and eye color blue. So it's a pretty useless exercise. I mean, it doesn't have any use here, but it teaches you how you use the object and features. Like more or less every class that you're going to design from now is going to have these features. It has to have some sort of encapsulation, protection of the variables, and also constructors, because otherwise you cannot create objects. And the good thing about using classes is that once you have created it, you can use it as many times as you like. So going into here, you can actually create a completely different object which will do the same stuff. So instead of a tall man, we can come in here and define a short man. And this one, we can change the values straight away. You can even use a completely different constructor. So for example, in the previous example, we used the second constructor. Let's use the first one this time, which has only height and weight. So there is no age. I'm going to delete this. The short man is 156 and his weight is around 55. Now that you have the short man, you see this man's age and also eye color is not defined. So what we need to do is, using the set methods, we're going to define their age. So I'm going to make him 23 years old. And short man eye color is going to be brown. So those features that you can identify, you identify them in the constructor, and then later on you can add more stuff using the set methods. A lot of people get confused why I don't define everything in the constructor in one go. And that is because in a realistic application, you don't only have 4 variables. You have maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 50. And you don't always know their state at that time, because the classes communicate with one another and their state can change or define later. What you know is these variables exist there, but their state is not always known to you. So At the beginning, when the object is created, those that you know their state already, you define them in the constructor. Those that you do not know their value at that time, you put them as set methods. Okay, that is how it is handled in object-oriented programming. And if you do not define this private and make it public, then you breach the rules of encapsulation, because encapsulation tells us that if you want to change the value of a variable, you need to use a set method, which is passed as setter. And if you want to get the current value, then it is called a getter. Okay? Once you have defined this, you can simply show the same features. Now you can copy paste this, of course, and put it on there. And put everything in there, if you like, for the short man. This code is incredibly repetitive, so it's not my suggestion how you do this stuff, because one of the key points of object-oriented programming is to make things as short, as basically as little code as possible. So if you do this stuff with short man and just copy paste, you know, the previous example and put the values over there like that, it will work. It's not wrong at all. It's gonna work. But it also shows that you are repeating the code. Now, one of the things you should really be aware that code repetition is not a good thing. If there are two programs, okay, that does the same job, one with the 10 lines and the other one with 50 lines, the program with 10 lines is a better program. The less code you have, the more control you're gonna have in the program, okay? That is the ideal way of how you deal with this. So once you realize that you are repeating patterns in the program, such as with this one, with every object creation, you have to show this stuff, then you need to find a way, a more efficient way, so that you can put this stuff in there. So we can create, I think, an array list of objects. I'm gonna and I'm just gonna import the array list there. So what I'm doing in here is that I'm gonna create a list. It doesn't even have to be an array list. You can even create a list if you want, but I'm just gonna use array list. I'm gonna create a list, basically, to put my objects inside. And using this list, I'm gonna list the properties, okay? It is a much better way, I think, to do it than constantly repeating these lines for every single object. So what we're gonna do in here, I'm gonna add to the array list my objects. So I'm gonna put add. First object that I'm gonna add is tall man. The second object that was created was short man. So I'm gonna add them in here. So in short, I'm trying to create a more efficient way to access the state of these objects, okay? One of the things that we can do in here is that we can also give it a name for each man. So let's just add that property. So string name for each man. And because this variable is not defined in the constructor, I'm gonna add a get and set method. So insert code, getter and setter name. Once again, just to show you, insert code, getter and setter. I want both of them at the same time, putting onto the name and generate the code. As soon as you do this, you see get name and set name being prepared there. So you don't even have to type it, you know. Computer does everything. You just need to know where to click, and that's it. I usually put my get and set methods separately, even separate them with comments. So it's a good practice to say this is getters, and then when the setters start, you just put it there, setters, so that you know which one is where, okay? Try to get this habit of good programming practices because it will help you to organize the code better. Now that I have this, I'm gonna go in there for the short and tall man and define their name. Short man dot set name is gonna be short man. And I'm gonna do the same thing for tall man. Set name. Now, what I am trying to do is to get rid of this so that I will show it only once. To do that, we can use the new for structure that maybe you haven't seen it before. If you have taken visual programming class from me, you probably know for each loop. But if you haven't taken that course, this might look a little bit foreign to you. A for each loop is particularly useful when you want to iterate objects. It is an ideal way if you want to iterate objects one by one, and every single one of them. It is a limited loop compared to the regular for loop, but it is also easier to use. So you can say something like each man, which is your object, under man. In this case, the man is the object itself. Let's look up the for each loop because I think this is the way that C# does it. This is the problem that if you know too many languages, you mix up in which one you does what. So for each loop Java, let's look it up how to use it. Yes, the type, variable, array, and then the statement. So I didn't type the type, so I'm gonna go back and type it. So man, each man, in man, and the array itself. So in this case, my array list. And then in here, I'm gonna show each man one by one. Oops. So this one shows the type, variable, and the array. Integer number, numbers. So in this case, this is each in my array list. This one we can call it my man list. Each man in man list. According to here, it should be okay because it says type, variable, array, and the statement, which is what I did. Was the type for it is man, so it's going to be man in my man list. Let's try to show it, and we can fix that up later. So I'm gonna delete the stuff completely, and instead of trying to show it short man and whatever, tall man and stuff like that, I'm gonna show it as each man. Let's see, I should have an example about this for each loop. Yes, here. Let's see how it's handled. Here, button, then my buttons. In this case, my buttons is an array list, I guess. Let's find out. Okay. So we can go back. Where is it? The problem with this is that I have to change this to an array list structure. So it's like the man has to be a man list. So if I do this as man and this one is a man and define a actual array, seems it's gonna work. Yeah, I told you that engineering is all about Googling stuff. So let's find out how this is gonna work. For each loop, Java array list. So we are very close, but there is a problem that it doesn't understand what I am trying to do. So in here, you see we added this and this. So we have the object and we want to show it with the array list, which is exactly what I did. I'm just creating an array list, just as in here, and I'm showing it with the for each loop. But somehow this didn't work for me. So I'm having the array list here, man each list. This one should be my man list. Doesn't understand it. Okay. Well, I'll handle this later on. It seems like there's something is missing there. It's not of a big issue. You know, I'm just trying to optimize my code as I go through, and it seems like I did exactly the same thing in here. New array list string, and then showing it. And the answer is basically your code works if you don't have any output. You may have forgotten to add some values to the list. I did add the values to the list. These are short man and long man, which are already there, and they are under my list. But I think this one is not seeing the man for some reason. I don't know why. I need to look it up to fix it. Now we can use the object, that's true. Yes, but it is a man. Thank you, Yavuz, for your suggestion, but I want to make it a man because when you think of each man, it is actually a man. You see, these are, don't like to treat it as an object. There's a way to do this. You are right. You can do the object in here. Absolutely correct. Thank you for suggestion. But what I was trying to do here is that I don't want to treat this as a regular object, but rather a man. You see, because tall man and short man is a man. And I defined the array list as a man. So I didn't want to use object in here. But maybe we can leave that later on and just show whatever we have right now. So we can put this one as as you suggested, each man. Let's go in there. Each man dot get name. See, when you use the object, you won't be able to use the methods for your man class. So all of this is not going to be available to you. All this stuff that you've written down is not going to come through you, through the object, because object is obviously not a man. This has to be a man. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it. That's the problem. It's interesting, something to look at. As you can see, they use the object in here as well. Anyway, next lecture, I'll look into this and show you the solution. I need to go over my notes because I forgot how to do it. Basically, I did that in previous exercises many times over. Let's look at some of the exercises here. Maybe I'll find a solution. We usually use then, oops, not this one. Not this one either. The class name, because when you create the object, as you say, the object is not going to recognize the man properties, which is why I don't like it for each. It's the only exercise with the array. I don't want that one because in the array it's very straightforward. You can see that in the array just created, 10 values, read from there. It's quite straightforward. I don't want that. I want the more flexible solution, the one that will make me more happy. Anyway, in the next lecture, I'll make sure to show you how to do that stuff. It's not that important, but obviously when you go back to the program, if you do this an object, you see this is an object, then you need to somehow convert it to a man, because you can't access the man properties. That is the problem with it. Maybe you can do it as each man as man. Let's try. So this has to be a man, otherwise it won't understand it. We will look into this in the next lecture. I'll make sure to show you the solution. You got the point now. The one that I did with the short man and the long man, it's already there. So the idea here is not about, writing an array list. That's something extra that I wanted to add. I wanted to show you how you can show these values, how you can get them. That is the focus. I'm going to fix this later and definitely show you how this is going to work next lecture. And Yaus, thank you so much for your suggestion for the object. It's nice to see that you are contributing and helping me out. And this is how the lecture should go. You should contribute. And I really appreciate that you did that. Now that we understand this part, I'm going to fix this and show you in the next lecture. I don't want to lose more time on it. I want to move on and show you other stuff. So far, we talk about constructor and destructor. The destructor is basically something you don't have to worry in Java because it is done automatically. Destructor is done, it's the opposite of constructor. Destructor is basically a method in the class to destroy the object. So when you are done with the object, it has to be destroyed. Otherwise, it occupies space in the RAM and your computer slows down because you use an object. Basically, you have an object in the RAM that you don't even use, which is a bad thing. There is something called garbage collection in Java, which is something that you have to destroy the objects. Well, it does destroy the objects automatically, so you don't have to do this manually. Like in C++, when you create an object, you have to destroy it manually. There is something called a destructor method, which gives you the freedom of how you arrange RAM in the computer. So basically, as soon as you know that you don't need that object, you can destroy it. However, in Java, this is done automatically. You don't have to do this by yourself. From the developer side, this is a perfect thing because you don't have to deal with another extra method to destroy the objects once they are used. But there's always a but. If you are building up a program that performance of the program is your priority, like how fast the program runs on a wide variety of computers, such as, for example, video games, then Java is probably a not good language. And that is why we don't see games being developed in Java, because it is a developer-friendly language, but compared to C++, it is slow. And the reason is it doesn't allow you to access the memory like other languages, like C++. Like you can use a destructor, for example, on your own when you know that you don't need the object. You can arrange memory allocation, where in Java these things are handled automatically. As a developer, I find this really useful. It's very friendly to me that I don't have to deal with the objects one by one. You know, once I show the object, I'm done with it. It just destroys it automatically, which is a great thing. But, you know, every good thing comes with a cost. And the cost here is basically you lose the control over the program, especially RAM-wise, memory-wise. You lose the control, hence why Java programs usually work slower than C++ programs. So to summarize the programming constructs, so far in the lectures that you have taken, there were 3 programming constructs that we focused on, such as sequence, selection, iteration, and so forth. With the object-oriented programming, these paradigms completely change. You focus on data encapsulation. The idea here is to make the program as efficient as possible, okay? It's not about writing the program. It's not about making a program run anymore. It's about making the program run in the most efficient way possible, okay? That is the core idea of object-oriented programming, to make the program as efficient as possible with the least amount of lines and in a manageable fashion that will make sense to everyone in a standard way, basically. And the first standard that we saw today was get and set methods. You don't have to write them. As you can see, you can simply right-click on your class, insert code, and then put a getter and setter anywhere, as long as you don't have them. So just to clarify, data encapsulation is a necessity in object-oriented programming because it keeps the classes independent. You can think of classes as your houses. You know, if you're gonna invite someone to your house, they can come to your house, but within your permission, right? It's not gonna randomly come into your house without you not knowing it, because it is your private space. And this is how the classes are evaluated in object-oriented programming. It is an entity that has its own identity, not an entity, but a template for an entity. And it has to preserve that. This is why every single variable that we create in here in the classes, the concrete classes, you see they're private, unless you know that their state is going to be accessed from outside. All right, that is the first thing that we covered. We saw get and set methods. You see that they are defined public always. Every single get and set method is public. This is automatically done by your IDE, but you can also write them manually. So public, as you can see, the difference is the get method returns the value, where set method basically modifies the value. Here's the example for it. You can see it on your slides. It's an example for a set method and a get method. In the old days, these were called accessor and mutator, but no one used them anymore. We just call them getter and setters. And to call a method through the object, you just type the object name dot the method name. If they have any argument that you want to pass, such as in the set one, you have to pass them down through that value. You see in here, whenever I use the set method for the short man and the long man, I set the age and then number is passed. If I type a value here, a string value, it will give me an error because set age only accepts a number. If you go into the man class, you see that it accepts an integer. So you need to follow up the data type, okay? If you put something other than the required data type, it will create you some problems. Anything you don't understand up to this point? Here's more examples. I'm not solving all of these exercises as we are in the summer school. So, I basically solved the man exercise, but I didn't really finish it as in the slides, because in the slides, I think there are more men than I created. There was the caveman, biker man, strongman, but more or less, I used the same template. Now, before I move further, do you have any questions? Anything you would like to stop me, discuss? You're not asking many questions, guys, and I'm really worried. This, as I told you many times, supposed to be an interactive course. And you are not interactive at all. So the next topic that I'm going to cover is inheritance. This week on Monday, I actually have a meeting, so I won't be able to come to the course. So instead of on Monday, I want to do a lecture on this Friday again and finish this subject. Are you all available on this Friday around 10:30? Yes, 10:30 this Friday, which is, checking out my calendar, 14th of August. So 14th of August 2020, 10:30. Next week I have a meeting on Monday, and then the rest of the week I will be on holiday. So I want to do the lecture on Friday instead of Monday, just for this week. And we don't have too many topics left anyway. So we have like 2 more topics to cover before finishing the term. As you can see, there's inheritance, abstract classes, and polymorphism, and that's it. I'm going to enable them on Moodle. So if you want to look at them in advance, you will be able to do so. So let's move on to the next subject, which is called inheritance. Inheritance is the second important construct in object-oriented programming. In this construct, you focus on making a class, organizing classes in a way that they have a relationship with one another. Okay, and the inheritance means that from the English word, you allow classes to inherit something, either variables, constant, methods from another class. The entire idea behind this is reusability. So in object-oriented programming, you try to reuse everything as much as you can. And by doing so, you reduce the number of code you write, and hence the program can run faster. Okay? The parent-child relationship indicates that with each child, you upgrade something on the parent. Okay? So basically, the parent itself is a generic class, and then when you create a child class, it is kind of like an upgrade on the top of that parent class. That is the idea, okay? It's not exactly a parent-child relationship as we know, but it is kind of like upgrading it with each step. Now, one of the things that you should know about object-oriented programming, a modern one at least, is that a child can have only one parent. So in a relationship, you expect, for example, a child to have a mom and a dad like this. You know, there could be more than one parent, but in modern object-oriented programming, this is not true because it complicates the structure of classes. So a child class can only have one parent. Now, there are exceptions for this, such as the language C++, which you all covered in your previous courses, allows multiple inheritance, which means a child can have more than one parent in C++. But those languages that came after C++, such as C#, Java, Python, all the other languages that we use today, they do not directly support multiple inheritance because it is very difficult to organize the classes in that way. Instead, they use something called interfaces, which is kind of like a simplified version of a class that allows you to define a very abstract class definition and use it. What you need to know about inheritance is that the classes are related to one another and they reuse data, as I told you. And when you create the classes, the class that is the parent is called the superclass, which then you can use the super keyword to access it, and the child class is called the subclass. And in the UML class diagram, when you want to show this relationship, it is always the derived class that goes to the base class. Okay, so the arrow that you see in here should always go from child to the parent. The derived class, also called child or subclass, establishes a relationship with the base class, also called the parent or the base class itself. When a parent, which is the superclass, has a child class, which is the subclass, we can say that that subclass extends the superclass. As a matter of fact, you actually applied this before, but you didn't know it at the time. When we go to the previous exercises that we have completed, look at what you did. You could created, for example, a public class form1 and you extended the JFrame. What you do here is that your JFrame is actually your parent class, and form1 here is actually your child class. So basically, the child makes an upgrade on JFrame. You use some of the features of JFrame, all these features, such as the title, the size, the layout, close operation, location relative to, they all come from the J-frame itself. They do not exist actually outside of J-frame. And the only reason why you are able to use these, all these titles whatsoever, is because you are extending the J-frame, which means you make J-frame your parent class and you want to upgrade it. You want to make it customized. Okay, that is the core idea behind this. Instead of rewriting another J-frame, you want to kind of like reuse it so that you can shape it according to your needs. Okay, most people do not understand what the relationship between parent and child, and they think that the child is kind of like a lesser being compared to parent, but it is not true. It is the parent who is basically very abstract, and the child is more defined. Okay, by using the extends, you establish an is-a relationship between the classes, and with each child you make an upgrade. A good example is how the cars are developed over the decades. So basically the concept of a car is the same from 100 years ago, let's say. What it does is like basically it has these four wheels, there's an engine, there are lights, there's doors, there's this, there's that, and it defines the concept of car. But with each child, you see, the concept of car is being upgraded and new stuff added on it. So you can see that there can be only one child at a time, and each one puts an upgrade. That is the relationship between two classes. And you can see this in many different examples as well. It doesn't have to be only in cars. You can see it in the computer. Like you can have a Mac, a desktop, a table, tablet PC, and they're all counted as computers. And each one is actually making an upgrade on the computer because each one is a more defined property, more defined template, okay? The purpose for a tablet PC is different from a Mac computer, and the same can be said in between desktop PC. So with each upgrade, it becomes more defined. A very good example is how you can divide animals. You can create a generic animal class and define their features in there, such as each animal can move, each animal has an age, and so forth. But with each one, with each animal, there will be additional features, such as a fish swims. The way that a fish moves is different than a bird or a dog. The fish swims, the bird flies, the dog runs, the cat walks, and so forth. So each one of them has an age, and each one of them has a move. Those common properties are defined in the animal class, which means it is their parent class. And then with each child, you make the classes more specialized. Okay, you can see it in here that the age is defined in the animal. There are certain methods that define them, which all of them has them. And with each class, it basically extends. So fish extends animal, birds extend animal, dogs extend, and cat extends. The extend relationship means is a. So cat is an animal, dog is an animal, fish is an animal. So extend, you can basically read it as an is a relationship, which is written on the, as you can see on the slides as well. Notice that some classes can be both subclass and a superclass, because with each time you only extend one class. So animal can be extended, like animal can have many children, many child classes. As we go up, we see that a parent class can have many child, but each child can only have one parent. However, you can put classes in the middle to make this more organized. So if you have a husky class, you can basically allow a dog class to be the parent, and that dog class extends the animal as well. So in this case, husky is a dog and dog is an animal. And whatever properties animal has is automatically transferred to husky as well. And the way that you write is also differs. You see the public class animal, public class dog extends animal, public class husky extends dog. Because husky extends dogs and dog extends animal, whatever properties are under the animal is automatically inherited inside the husky as well. One last thing before we go to build up an exercise about this is to know the difference between public and protected. So far in the modifiers, we saw public and private, the two of them. Now with the inheritance property, we're going to look into protected as well. Okay, the protected value means that for the outside class that are not the child class, the defined variables or features or methods, whatever that is basically private. So assume that, going into this example, there's the animal class and there's the dog class and there's the husky class. If the dog class has a protected variable, another class that doesn't exist in this hierarchy, let's say a bird class that doesn't basically has no relationship with the dog, for that class, the defined variable is private. So there is no way that the bird class can directly access to the variable of a dog class. However, if the value is defined in a hierarchy, the child can access it. It means that the value defined in here in the dog, the husky class can access to the protected one. But any other class that is not the child of the dog cannot access it. That is the meaning of protected. Okay? Public is represented as a plus sign, which is something that we covered. Remember in the last lecture, I showed you the UML class diagram. And the protected is represented as a hashtag, the one that you use on Instagram. Okay, it's the same one. If you open up the UML class diagram notations from the previous lecture, you will see all these symbols being represented there. It is something that we covered in the last lecture. See, plus indicates public, minus indicates private, dash or hashtag, whatever, indicates protected. The package, I never use it, so you can even omit this. I just give it an extra information. And we underline some variables or methods, which stands for static, such as the main method is a static method. And that is how you show it. If you go to the NetBeans and find the main method, you will see that the main method itself is a static method. Let's find it and show it to you. See, static. To show some method or a variable is static, which means it's only accessible from the class, we underline it in the diagram. Okay? So it is a good idea to know these UML notations, because basically designers, when they gonna design the relationship between classes, they represent these as UML class diagrams. They don't actually write the code. They give you the diagrammatic representation of the program, and that's how you should be converting the program. As a matter of fact, this is how your final exam question will be as well. If you look at some of the exercises that I'll put on here, let's just open some of them. There are examples there that I can show you. Such as UML class diagram, object and classes. Let's just enable them. these exercises can be really useful. You see, in the final exam, what I'm going to ask you is to give you this UML class diagram itself, and I'll expect you to generate the class for me. Okay, so I'm going to say that there's an employee class, has a UML class diagram below. These are the variables, these are the methods. Create me this class and then create me a test class that has these features. Okay, this is going to be the way that I'm going to ask you the final exam. All right, guys. So pay attention to how you read the UML class diagram. It's incredibly important. Whenever you see on the UML class diagram, this minus sign means that it's private. The plus sign means that it's public. Okay, these are set methods, as you can see. And there are specific methods accepting some values and doing some stuff, which are all explained in here. What I want you to, by next lecture, is have a look at these exercises. You have a good idea about class and object relationship, as well as we now know inheritance. Have a look at these exercises, and if you don't understand anything, let me know. Our time in summer school is very, very limited. Normally, in a regular term, I solve some of these exercises, although not all of them. I do solve some of them, but as you can see, our time is very tight in summer school, and I'm teaching other courses and having 2 master students to finish this term. So it's a very kind of like fast-paced version of the regular term. So you need to do perhaps the double work in the summer school. Okay, so have a look at them. We can discuss if you don't understand it. Whenever you establish basically a parent-child relationship, you usually establish a many-to-one or one-to-many relationship. And you can see this from this diagram as well. If you go up, you see that each animal has one parent. So that's a many-to-one relationship. Birds belongs to animals, fish belongs to animal, whatsoever. But with this one, with the animal, it can have many different sub-categories in this case, many different sub-animals, as we might call them. So many-to-one relationship. So there would be many child classes, but each child should have one parent. It is always this way that the relationship is established in Java, okay, and also many different contemporary languages, with the exception that C++. C++ is a weird language. It is a very powerful language, but it is also evil. It can destroy you in an instant if you don't know what you are doing. And it supports multiple inheritance, which means you can have more than one parent. And it just, can come to a certain point that class is almost impossible to deal with if you don't know what you are doing. C++ is freedom, but it's also dangerous. What you can do with that freedom, you can mess up the program very, very easily. And a good example to this is assume that this class and that class has the same variable, exactly the same method for some reason, because they also have their own parents. In that case, you will know from which class the variable is coming. And it can be a very, very difficult experience, okay, to deal with that. So multiple inheritance is something that we do not encourage nowadays, okay, especially if you are learning this concept for the first time. There is no multiple inheritance in Java. And the Java way of dealing with this is what we call as polymorphism or interfaces. It means that you define a parent class, an abstract class basically, which is something I'm going to show you in the next lecture. And the abstract class serves as a template for all the other classes, and they kind of like change the way that they apply the same method. For example, if you have an animal class that has the method make noise, then each animal makes a different noise. The way that they make the noise is different, but they all make the noise. Okay. Another good example this is how you can apply the move method for animals, such as a fish basically moves, a dog moves, and a bird moves, but the bird flies, the fish swims, and the dog runs. So the way that they apply this is different. This idea is called polymorphism. It means changing the way that it is applying, okay? There are more examples in here. And I'm going to solve now a small exercise just to show you how inheritance can be done. And we're going to stop there. In the next lecture, we will continue with it. So going back into the application, I'm going to create a new Java class and call this animal. Now this animal class is going to be my parent class. Okay, because it's my parent class, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to create two different variables. And I'm going to create variables as protected because I know that there will be child. And I'm going to create an age for the animal because every single animal has an age. And other than that, I'm going to create a constructor for my animal, public animal, and the constructor will accept the value integer n. And you can basically assign the value to the value passed through the constructor. We know that this age value has to be returned somehow. So I'm going to put insert code, getter and setter for the age, both of them, just setting up the set, and get as well. Returning the value, setting up the value. I'm going to do something different here and create an empty constructor. An empty constructor is actually not a very good thing, but it can come handy when you have only when you're not going to use the parent class as an object, particularly like as an abstract class, and you're just going to use this as a template for other classes, which is basically how inheritance is used in most cases. Okay. Generally speaking, empty constructors are not a good thing. It is not something that we encourage, but you can use them. It is possible to create it, and then you can set up the values later on. I am also going to create something called public method, basically. And within that method, I'm just going to write JOption pane show message dialog. This you just say animal moves. This is my parent class. You can make this not. The parent class is basically a template for the actual class. I'm going to save this. As you can see, there are no errors on it. And I'm going to use this class to basically create another class. And this class that I'm going to create is called dog. The first thing, as soon as I create the dog class, is going to be extending the animal class. You see, when I type this, it means that the dog is an animal. So all the features in the animal, everything you have typed here in the animal is automatically passed to the dog. Okay, that is the meaning of extend. just the way that you are doing it with the JFrame. In order to set the title, other properties, you are extending the JFrame. And that is exactly what we are doing here. Once you have created the animal, you are extending it so that the dog has the same properties. But the dog can also have its own features, okay? So we know that the dog has an age because every animal has age. So this one passed automatically. We can also have a private component. Private breed of the dog. Okay. And once we have done this, you can create a constructor. You can create the constructor, either the empty one that we created or the one with the age. Now with the one that comes with the age, it accepts a number here. You can put age, and in order to use the constructor of the animal, you can simply type super. Super refers to the super class. In this case, the super class of dog is animal. Okay, so you're basically using that one to refer it. In order to use super keyword, you must have a class that is basically a parent class. If you delete this, you see that the super keyword gives you an error because it doesn't understand which one is the super class. As soon as you put it back, it doesn't give you the error anymore. Now that you define the constructor, you can set up a get and set method for it. Insert code, getter and setter, breed. And you can even check up, as you can see, from the animal if you want to, but we don't need that because the animal already has it, already has a set and a get method. So we set up the dog and everything. Now, what you can do in here is that you can even overwrite the classes. You can overwrite the methods. And overwriting a method means that you're going to take up a method and change it to the way that you want it to do stuff. In the original class, we had a move method. The animal was moving and it says animal moves. Now I'm going to change it, and instead of saying animal moves, I'm going to say something like dog runs. And wherever I create this, instead of using the method that says animal moves, it will show me that the dog runs. Now let's create the main one. So I'm going to come in here, main animals. So deleting all this stuff here and going to copy paste a main method. Where is it? Animal. Yeah, here. And I can create an animal and a dog here. If you're going to create an animal, it's going to be really, really basic, which is something that we don't really, suggest to do at this point. But it is possible, for example, you create a cat through the animal class. Whenever you do this, you can either use an empty constructor, in this case, or you can use the constructor with the age. This one is in the same directory as the other. Let's see. Package object oriented. Yes. Main animal. Yes. Animal class. Should be okay. So I'm creating new animal here. So there should be new keyword to create the animal. So as you can see, I can create a cat with the animal class. But for the dog one, I can create it with the dog class. And let's call it my dog equals to new dog. And you can use the empty constructor itself, but you can also use the number, which is why we said that it's not really a good idea to omit to basically put an empty constructor. I mean, it is possible that you can put it in here and you can create it, but then this object will not have a value at all. It will be empty. So it's not really suggested to do that. When you create it, you expect the object to have some sort of property. It's not wrong, as you can see, it runs, but it is suggested that you have a number there in this case to do something with it. And now that we have this, the animal and the dog and everything, we can basically call the methods. So whenever I say cat move and my dog move, they will show different methods now. Because in the animal class, the move was the animal moves. For the dog, it was dog runs. So let's try to run this thing. It says animal moves and the dog runs. So do you understand how it is now? You customize the animal. You make it the way that you want it to run. It still uses the same method. It is still move, and you are overwriting it. So it's not a new method. So it's not really occupying more space in the RAM because it already created that. But the only part difference is how you display the error message. What you display is different. Okay, so you kind of like customize the method when you overwrite it. And when I say overwriting the method, this is the meaning of polymorphism. This is what I meant when I said customize your classes for each animal. If you go up, I mentioned the fact that each animal moves differently. See, fish swim, dogs runs, bird fly. That's what I meant by overwriting the method for the move. Okay, and this idea in object-oriented programming is called polymorphism. I hope you understood what I meant. You need to repeat this a little bit more, probably in your own free time, to understand this concept. I'm going to stop in here. And in the next lecture, I will show you the solution of that array list exercise that I omit. I apologize for it. There's probably a small mistake that I made there. I'm just going to go through now as the lecture is finishing. I'm going to go back to it and fix it. And I'll show you how to do that properly in the beginning of the next lecture. And we'll also focus on the very last chapters in here. So we kind of like covered inheritance as well, very basically, although, and we're going to go into abstract classes and interfaces in the next lecture. And we're going to be done actually with the topics. Okay. So before I end up this lecture, do you have any questions? Is everything clear? Okay. Well, thank you for coming to my lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been almost 2 hours that I'm talking nonstop. So I'm going to stop the lecture here. We're going to have another lecture on Friday because, as I said, I will not be available on Monday. And the week after, we're going to meet again and probably discuss your final exam, like what you need to expect there, what you need to see, stuff like that. Thank you for coming, and I will upload this video on YouTube. I'll see you guys. Take care.